Good morning, everybody. My name is Miss Gallivan, and I'm a staff member here at Alpine Valley School. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out today. Hope you don't mind if I just sit. I'm 7 months pregnant and been standing most of the day, and I'm ready to just be down for a little bit. So before we get started with our panel discussion this morning, I just wanted to introduce kind of the school and its philosophy and why we're here and why we do what we do. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to do that before we dive into the Q&A. So why does Alpine Valley School exist? In my opinion, Alpine Valley School exists because your kid is amazing, and they deserve to stay that way. They deserve to have a place they can go where everything that's unique about them is embraced. And if they love dinosaurs, or they love math, or they love, orbital physics, they can have a place to explore those things and be who they are and continue to be amazing their whole lives. And we do that and provide that environment for them by this philosophy that's based in freedom, respect, responsibility, and integrity. And we provide that to all of our students and the staff too, in that you have the freedom to explore things, you have the freedom to make mistakes. You are responsible for your own behavior though. So if you make a mistake, we expect you to own up to it. We expect a certain level of engagement from everybody. We also expect integrity, and that people learn how to have integrity through these experiences they have at school. And they learn to be authentic, and we respect their authenticity. We respect their unique nature, and we don't try to change who they are. We may say that certain behaviors need to change to be more socially acceptable in this particular group and what we've agreed on, but who you are is wonderful, and we don't want to take that away. And how we actually do that on a day-to-day basis, we have a community that is entrenched in civic engagement, in living in a microcosm of actual society. So you come here every day and you experience things that in many cases people don't get to experience until they're much older. There's a level of engagement that's similar to jury duty, that's sitting with your peers and trying to figure out what really happened and how we should deal with it as a community. There's taking care of the campus through chores and cleaning up. There's being able to deal interpersonally with one another by using the judicial system, by engaging in the school meeting. And everyone has a voice. And that's something I think that is really important that people who go to the school learn, is that you have a voice and things are not inflicted on you. You are not subject to the whims of whatever higher power tells you is important. You are part of the decision-making process. And so in the day-to-day life at school, there's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of kind of doing whatever you're interested in at the time. But there's also this idea of being part of a larger group and being part of a community, and that what you do matters and what you do affects other people. So at its core, that's really what we're all about. And at its core, what we really want is for kids to have a place that's theirs, that they own, they decide what happens, and they're the ones who, at the end of the day, are responsible for how they've spent their lives and how they have enjoyed their time and this precious time as children. So that's a little bit of an introduction. And I'd like to invite our other panelists up to the stage now to join me, and I'll have them all say a little bit about themselves too, and how they came to the school and that kind of thing. And then we'll take questions from the audience.
Thank you, Missa. My name's Randall Alford, and my wife Deborah and I first came to the school almost 17 years ago, or maybe a little over 17 years ago. I lose track. We've had our two older children. Both have completed the graduation process and received their diploma. Our youngest son is still here, has his last year going on right now. We came to this school because we knew, in particular, our oldest son was very bright and filled with imagination and creativity. And he was attending a wonderful Montessori school up in Evergreen, which every time I stepped on the campus, my heart opened and sang and said, oh, I wish I'd had this when I was a kid. But what I didn't know was, as he was moving forward through the grade levels at this school, there was this increasing emphasis on compliance and preparation for being mainstreamed into preparatory schools and so on. And it was literally making him sick. He was unhappy, his stomach was upset all the time, and everyone was suggesting, well, you could give him this drug or that drug, and we got him a tutor and all this stuff. A friend of ours gave us, I believe it's a yellow postcard that AVS had sent out, and she said, I think you might be interested in this. And my wife saw it, and I think she called Larry that same day, arranged for an interview, and within a matter of days, our two older children were enrolled. And my background is I was a public school star. I was valedictorian in a class of 700 here in Colorado. I went on to an Ivy League school where I graduated summa cum laude. I came out of school unhappy, disconnected, had no idea who I was. Everything about myself was predicated on meeting other people's expectations, grades, the affirmation of a system. And I spent probably a good 15 years trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do as an adult. And I love the idea of not disconnecting our kids from their sense of self, their sense of purpose, and their sense of passion. And yet I was still scared, because all I knew was academics. And I've often told the story over the years that it took me a good 3 years to relax into and trust this wonderful environment here at AVS. Our kids have thrived. We're proud of every one of them, even the one who's here listening to me, and I shouldn't be saying this while he's in the room. But just as Mrs. said, this school honors kind of the unique brilliance of each child and encourages it. And we all have our unique gifts, we all have our unique ways of being in the world, and unlike most schools, we're affirmed in those characteristics here. And even parents and families, as members of this community, we're affirmed in our differences and affirmed in the gifts that we offer that are unique. And there's never a sense that anything is being imposed or coerced or manipulated about it. And I think the world needs more of this. And that's why my wife and I have been here for so long, and why we're so delighted to continue to be a part of this community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kay Kamen, and I just have to say ditto, because Randall's experience with his oldest son mimics almost exactly my experience with my son Isaac, except it happened about 10 years later. He was at the exact same school, exact same experiences. We were directed by a tutor that the school had suggested that we hire. And she researched some assistance when she could see how painful it was for my son to be there. And she came up with the name of an educational consultant, Jeffrey Freed, who came and assessed Isaac and gave me a list of about 7 different schools in the Denver area that he thought would be a better fit. When I was not finding anything really different or appropriate, Jeffrey checked in with me and he said, did you check out Alpine Valley School? And I said, well, I did, but it sounds kind of crazy. And he said, I think that this would really be good for Isaac. I think you should check it out. So I did. Isaac immediately became enthralled with it. And I was so happy that we were no longer depressed and that I did not have to help him with a 5th grade research paper, and tie up all of our free time with what I consider to be mindless homework, et cetera, et cetera. However, I didn't really have the trust in the model. But I very quickly developed that trust, in large part from talking with Randall's oldest son, Jesse, who had basically had the same experience. But I had the benefit then of seeing what happened with someone who was very much like my son, and had graduated from this school. And I was very, very pleased not only with what I was hearing and observing from Jesse, but also every single graduate that I have ever spoken with, or heard them talking. I thought, wow, young people are coming out of here, and they're not only being successful, following their passions, but they're actually happy. And also, yes, I was valedictorian, but again, we reduced by 10s because it was only a class of 70, not 700. And all I ever knew about learning was get good grades and get that external feedback and approval. And it took me a very, very, very long time to recover from that and actually enjoy learning anything. So that's kind of our story.
My name is Ethan Welshon. I graduated from this school about 2 years ago. Previously to that, this has been the only school I really ever went to. I started when I was 5 years old, and then, of course, went all the way through my school career here. Now I'm working aboard a tall ship called the Lady Washington. It's a sail training vessel. Most recently, I was the engineer aboard, and pretty much ever since I graduated, I've been following my dreams, doing exactly what I want to do, and being happy with it, and making money, and doing pretty much everything I wanted to do in life.
Thanks, you guys. So, are there any burning questions from the audience? I'd be happy to answer anything you may have, and I'm also happy to warm us up with a question if nobody's got one on the tip of their tongue. I don't see any yet. Okay. Well, I have a question that I always like to ask people, and that I've been asked a number of times, because it turns out when your child is not even born yet, people want to know which preschool you're sending them to. And so talking about Alpine Valley with other parents, and the question I get a lot, and I'd love to hear from Randall and Kay in particular, and then Ethan, your experience as an alumni, is how do you feel that your child is prepared for the future without academics? That we don't have an emphasis on academics here. And in many people's minds, that is the only way that doors open for you in the adult world. And I'm curious what your feelings are about your children's experience, and then Ethan, your own experience as an adult, about not having had that emphasis. And do you think that they're still going to be successful?
I don't have to think that. I know that. Academics, I have a love-hate relationship with it, because, as I said, it did open some doors for me, and it closed a lot more kind of my interior doors. Closed a lot of my self-awareness and self-understanding down, displaced by all this emphasis on performance and academics. So I was just thinking, gee, I'm a recovering valedictorian. I was like, and that was part of my concern, because that was the only world I knew. So when our children came here, there's a part of me that wanted assurance that they would get what they needed. And time and again, I didn't have the benefit of having another person before me to kind of assure me, but there were books that were available about the Sudbury School, the original school out in Framingham, Massachusetts. So I took comfort in reading the books and all the stories and the chronicling of how unorthodox the success of people could be in this system. And I slowly learned to relax and enjoy the process, noticing that my kids, again, the happiness factor was huge for me as a parent, that my son would be happy coming home. Even my daughter had a little hard time transitioning because she was growing up like her dad, wanting to please people, saying, tell me what to do, I'll do it, and I'll feel good about myself. And her first question when she came to AVS was, well, where are the workbooks? Because she liked workbooks, and the staff worked with, well, if you want to create a workbook, let's create a workbook. We'll do this for you. And when she started getting a hint of the fact that she could actually learn whatever she wanted to learn, she transformed into something that she continues to be today, which is just this beautiful, expressive, creative person who makes a difference by following her own guidance and passion. There's so many things I want to say about the school, but fundamentally what it comes down to is, and one of the alumnus panels a few years ago, this phrase came out that I love as kind of a theme of school members, parents, the whole community. And the theme is, we're smart people, we'll figure it out. And I'm more interested in seeing kids who emerge who are willing to create new things than I am kids who know how to regurgitate old things. And that, to me, is the essence of this education.
Again, you stole my word, regurgitate, and I was really planning on using that. Anyway, I was thinking about this, Missa, and I was thinking, what's the opportunity cost of spending all your free time involved in, doing homework and academics and learning a lot of things, a curriculum built by other people and older people who are really not that familiar with technology and what's needed in the world that is changing very, very rapidly. I know that I have kind of overheard with some of Isaac's friends, they don't have time to study the subjects that they really are interested in pursuing as a career even, because of all of these mandatory requirements, that honestly have nothing to do with what they want to do with their lives, but it's sucking up all of their time. So I really think that there's a huge opportunity cost to be paid. Does it pay off in the end? Well, I don't know. I mean, like I said, all of the graduates that I've observed and spoken with, the ones I've seen up on this very stage, a lot of them crying tears of gratitude for this school, for their parents who let them go to this school. Do they feel like they missed out on a lot of academics? It's hard to think that they did. So I see actually a huge benefit to not having that pounded into you. Now, I get a little disturbed with my son because I always see him learning and teaching himself stuff. And I'd rather see him actually just going a little more brain dead every once in a while. I mean, do you really have to be reading right now? But that's his choice. And, a great example of academics here that you just wouldn't find in a traditional setting is there was an instance where there was a very, very young student in attendance, and Isaac and another older student, James, were asked by the younger boy to explain the physics of planetary orbit. Now, he's, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years old maybe, and these teenagers have been asked, can you teach me, I guess, why planets orbit, stars or something like that, something I don't understand. And so Isaac was explaining to me how much he and James learned in the process of distilling the physics of the planetary orbit into language and concepts that a 5-year-old could actually understand. So that's the kind of academics, that you get here. Does a 5-year-old get that in kindergarten? I don't know. It wasn't available in my kindergarten.
I guess just to tag onto that a little bit, something you see a lot with the students here is that they end up talking a lot like people like Richard Feynman or Neil deGrasse Tyson, the same way that it's they're kind of distilling really complex ideas and subjects into terms that anyone can understand and get a full grasp on. And I think that pretty much just comes from the fact that all the students here are always communicating with each other. And as far as how this relates to academics, it comes down to that people will pursue what they want to pursue. And certainly people here do that all the time. Whenever I'm interested in something, I'll go and research it to whatever extent I'd like to research it to, and take it as far as I'd like to take it. Sometimes that's very far, and sometimes it's not very far at all. And the school really gives you a good way to find the resources to do that, and the people to talk to, and the ability to talk to the people to learn what you need to know, to find out what you want to know, and to really get a grasp on anything you want to know about. And so, of course, I didn't ever experience any other school, so I can't tell you what I've lost. But certainly what I've gained is the ability to do pretty much whatever I want in my adult life. In that, whenever I want to learn something new, for instance, I went from being a person, a construction worker, to a ship's engineer aboard a sailing ship. I mean, there's a pretty huge disconnect and a big distance between those things, but it's easy to pick things up and learn basically whatever you want to learn and how to do it. And a lot of times it's learned kind of in an unconventional method. For instance, when I learned to be the ship's engineer, I didn't go to any school for that or any classes or anything like that. I worked with some of the other engineers that were aboard and worked in the engine department, and pretty much learned it from there, and then got hired on as the engineer. And the school really enables that kind of behavior where you become interested in something and you pursue it, and then you succeed in whatever you're wanting to do. And even if you don't succeed, you're like, okay, I came away with that with a different understanding of what this person does for a living and what I do or don't want to do for a living. And so things that you see all the time with the school is people just pursuing exactly what they want and nothing else, which I think is pretty great and I really enjoy in my life.
Could I add something?
Oh, sure, for sure.
I think that the students are tremendous teachers. The valedictorian had her son finally explain the infinite nature of pi to her recently. I never understood it in trig class, and he made it so simple and so painless. And he's teaching me all the time, and he's so patient. Now when it's something on the computer, he used to just come in as tech support and do it for me, but now he's actually standing beside me and making me do it myself, so I'll learn. So they're very, very good teachers.
Any questions? Yeah.
So I just wonder, are the students prepared for the more traditional education that they'll get in college?
So the question is, are the students prepared for the more traditional education they'll get in college?
I can address that to some extent.
Okay.
So after AVS, I was interested in welding and becoming a welder. And that meant going to a very traditional trade school and passing some tests and things like that to get into it. And so I found out that I was not as proficient in math as I needed to be to pass the test. And then the rest of the stuff I was able to pick up fairly quickly. And so I studied hard on the math and learned what I needed to know, and then eventually got into the class and learned welding for a long time. And then, of course, discovered that it wasn't something I was interested in and moved on. But really, what I've seen from my friends that have moved on into college and things like that from this school is that when they need to pick something up, when they need to learn something essentially in the traditional way, it's not hard to learn it in a traditional way because they understand what it is. It's not that somebody's trying to teach them math, it's that they understand that they need to learn a certain type of math that applies to that school and that way of learning. And they understand that that's what they need to learn to achieve their goal. And so it kind of just comes out differently then, instead of this is the only way to learn math, or this is the only way to learn whatever, to this is the way that I need to learn it to succeed in the field I'm looking to succeed in. And so pretty much it all just carries over, and then, yeah, like I said before, you have the ability to pick up and learn really anything you need to know. And if you can't learn it on your own, school really helps you. When you come out of the school, you'll have a good way of getting what you need. And so if you need somebody to help you learn whatever topic, you'll know where to find them, you'll know how to find them. That's not necessarily knowing that you know the person, it means that you know how to use Google to find them or who to talk to find them and things like that. So if anybody else has answers.
I asked that very same question of Jeffrey Freed when Isaac first enrolled here, because I had a concern that you just expressed, and he assured me that if Isaac wanted to go to college or wanted to take college classes, that he would teach himself whatever it was that he needed to know for that class in an extremely short period of time, because he would know how to go to whatever links or resources that he needed to.
The thing I always am aware of is that when we come into this world as children, we're learning machines. And, we don't have to take classes to learn how to crawl. We don't have to take classes to learn how to talk. And so there's a hunger. It's personally relevant to our own sense of happiness, well-being, and possibility. And that's another piece that kids stay connected to in this environment. Is this directly relevant to my personal sense of possibility, happiness, and well-being? And as I was saying before, this theme that came up is so relevant around we're smart people, we'll figure it out. Kids here have the sense of their own personal resource, their own sense of appropriate priorities. And to Ethan's point, if they see a goal that they set for themselves, or they have a purpose that's calling them forward, they have the tools and the confidence to move forward and accomplish those things. So it may look very unconventional or untraditional from the outside, but the essence of the learning is there. It's around, how do I solve this problem, or how do I achieve this goal? And they're not being pushed along the way, but there's something out there that's pulling them forward, calling out the best of them. And it's a very different way of trusting, that's not just based on intellect, but based on the fact that as human beings, we have a full array of resources that we tend, again, in traditional education and conditioning, to shut ourselves down to and cut off ourselves from. Instinctual things are this deeper knowing and caring. And for me, that's part of the experience and the value of being human, is remaining deeply connected to our sense of caring. And if I care, I'll do whatever it takes to learn what I need to learn, to overcome whatever perceived barrier is between me and my goal. Whereas if, speaking from my own experience, where I was just kind of targeting the grade and getting everybody else's approval through meeting their expectations, when I was dropped into the adult world, I kind of floundered for a while, I made the adaptive choice of, okay, well, let's see, I don't have academics to excel in anymore. How do I measure success? And I said, oh, I know, I'll make money. And it was not a very gratifying experience, and I'm so delighted that my kids are super smart, and to Kay's point, I'm learning from them all the time. They're always giving me new insights on things I do care about, philosophical ideas, things about new technology and how it relates to, the bigger questions of life. And I'm just always enriched in my conversations with them. And this topic of academics and so on, in some ways, becomes irrelevant, because it's not about, meeting some specific criteria for measuring success, unless it's one that my child chooses as being meaningful. Then they'll set that criteria and they'll meet it. I was a little concerned when my kids first came here, because, as I say, knowing what I knew had to do with being in public school and excelling in college and so on. I was aware, some part of me was aware that when we committed to having our kids come here, that I had to let go of a lot of my expectations. I had to let go of a lot of what was familiar to me. And one of those was I had to let go of the idea that they must go to college to be happy, or to have meaning, or to be important, or be positioned for success in life. And sure enough, both of my two older kids chose not to go to college. And in terms of income and success out there, all the outward, indicators of success that most people would apply, they're more successful than I am. And they're happier and at this stage of their life than I was at their stage. And I've really come to appreciate the fact that academics, it's like we're confusing academics. We're making what should be in service to our happiness into the master. And I trust my children to learn. I trust the school to provide them with the resources and the opportunities to learn. And my sense of what's important and possible has been totally recalibrated over the years. It's as I say, it's been almost 17 years now, and I don't give a second thought or concern about, well, gee, I hope Xander can understand the physics of how this happens, so that because that will, I don't even know why it's important. It's like, if Xander looks at something and says that's important, I know he'll learn it, and I'll support him in it, and I'll learn from it, because it's not like this burden or obligation that he carries around and wants to drop as soon as he comes home. When he comes home, quite often he'll bring his excitements with him, and we keep learning. So,
Great question. Any others? Yeah, so the question is, how has being at Alpine Valley affected our home life? And I'm happy to start. I have myself as a graduate, and my brother and sister also graduated from Alpine Valley, and from our family, pretty much everything changed. We moved to Colorado to come to this school. We were living in Nevada, and all of us attending public school, and we decided to uproot and move here and try something different. And it was a profound change in our home life. For me personally, I was 14, and I was immediately much happier and more energized, and had found a place where who I was as an individual was appreciated and encouraged. And I would have been valedictorian, I'm sure, had I continued, because on paper I looked really good. I looked like everything was going super well. But my internal life was really a struggle, and my relationship with my family was really a struggle. And so as soon as we enrolled, almost within a month or two, my relationship with my brother was very different. We were very antagonistic in the beginning, and we had found space and kind of our own groups of friends, and we're not fighting as much as we used to. I was talking to my parents ever, which was new. And just the whole dynamic of our family life at home had changed, because my parents were also no longer in the role of being the enforcers. They were the ones who had to make sure that I did my homework and my brother did his homework, and we were doing the things we were supposed to do, and going to school at 6:30 in the morning and getting up and those kinds of things. And as soon as that went away, there was a huge change in my relationship with my parents, that I could now talk to them and I could share things with them and not be worried that they were going to say, okay, but you still have 4 hours of homework and you need to get started on that. We don't really have time for this emotional discussion right now. You have stuff to do. And it was certainly not their fault that was the role. I think that's just how it happens, because, it sucks and kids don't want to do it. And so somebody has to sit down and make you do it. And it's a really tough thing. And so when that went away, boy, everything changed for us, and certainly for the better.
I love what Kay said about opportunity cost, because I think about how much of our time as parents was spent being part of the system of enforcement, pushing, and it didn't feel good to any of us. And Miss is absolutely right. When you take that pressure off, the challenges change. They're different, but the whole experience is different as well. I won't say, for us it was a little hard, because I was entrenched in my background and expectation. And suddenly I had these kids who I was saying, okay, when you go to school, you can think for yourself and be responsible and respectful and free. And when you come home, you live by my rules, kind of thing. It's like, that doesn't work so well. Suddenly they're coming back wanting to be free and respectful and expressive. And that took some calibration and, again, relaxing and trusting. But instead of my time being spent on trying to enforce some sense of who they should be or who I should be as their parent and what our family life should look like, we opened up to the real challenge of, how do we support each other in being happy? How do we support each other in getting what we most need to live like emotionally fulfilling lives? And it worked both ways. I was confronted with the fact that, gee, Randall, you're actually not as happy as you pretend to be. What's this resentment that's going on? And again, this dynamic of learning being triggered by a more intimately connected experience with my kids was of great benefit to me and totally unexpected. Our dinner table is often the site of a lot of spirited debates, and there's a lot of humor that comes out of this environment as well. And humor for me is one of the great ways of breaking up structures and rigidities that no longer serve me. And so I can, honestly say that this school has been a gift to our whole family and to myself personally.
Quite simply, we went from extremely unhappy to extremely happy. It was as if an enormous cloud of depression had been lifted because we were both depressed. The demands of the school, the schedule, the homework were all consuming. I felt like I was reliving the nightmare of fifth grade myself on steroids. So even with my reservations about this type of education, the lack of stress and the happiness would have been very hard to give up. So I'm very, very glad, though, that I had the opportunity of interacting with the graduates and seeing wonderful things happen that I had worried about, that I knew I no longer had to worry about. I was obsessed with Isaac learning to type. I thought he's interested in computer programming. That's probably going to be his career. And I could see when he came to this school, he was a hunt and peck typist. And of course, I competed in UIL typing myself. So I thought, well, the only way he's ever going to learn to type is if he sits down and practices every day like I did with a typing program. But Randall's wife, Deborah, I spoke with her after an event where her youngest son, Xander, was up here basically acting in a mock JC he was typing like a court reporter. He was reading edits and it was utterly amazing. And he wasn't very old. I think maybe he was 12. I think you were 12, Xander. And his fingers were flying across the keyboard. So I thought, how on earth did this young man learn to type? And Deborah Alford, when I asked her, she said, "Oh, it was online gaming." And sure enough, all I had to do was wait maybe about a year. After Isaac had been here about a year, I noticed he was typing, and then in a year and a half, he was typing faster than me. So I guess I got a little bit off track, but I was just extremely happy seeing my son typing really, really fast, and that was another way that an aspect of my worry and concern about this model of education just very quickly vanished. But I saw that I had to give it time, for the trust to develop, because it wasn't happening overnight. I wasn't getting performance reports every week or anything like that. But sure enough, it's all come, and I've just been happy from every aspect of involvement with Alpine Valley.
Well, what I'll have to say is a little bit different. My dad worked at the school. My dad's Larry. And so he was at the school the entire time that I was. And so both my sister and I went to this school with our dad here. And so a lot of times it's kind of weird because, we go to school with our dad in the morning and be at school all day with him, and it'd be student and staff. And then we'd go home and be father and son, or daughter and, or father and son, or father and daughter. But what did carry over was all the respect and the trust for us to make our own decisions, my sister and I, because that's what we did all day at school, where we made all of our own decisions. We were responsible for ourselves. And so when we went home, it worked pretty much the same way, just because our dad worked at the school and knew everything about it. And so it kind of carried over the respect and the trust and then the freedom that came with the school onto home, and made home life, I imagine, a little bit different than what it could be for other people. And in that way, I think it was great.
I think we've got time for one more. Yes.
What you guys have talked a lot about what high schoolers are doing and stuff like that. What are the younger years like?
Yeah. Okay. So what are the younger years like? And I think I'll probably just hand this both to like Randall and maybe Ethan can talk about being a little one here.
Again, as parents, we had our concerns because there's this fine balance between, total freedom and then helping the child to see what's possible. And what's wonderful about the mix of this community is that you've got the older students that we've been talking a lot about and the younger ones. And they're not segregated and separated. And, in most schools you see these little cliques form, and there's this great sense of division among things. Here there's a far more almost family feeling, but where it's very fluid. And it's like the younger children have the experience of seeing older examples every day. And as Kay was talking about, there's this wonderful opportunity for the older children to learn by caring for and teaching the younger children. There's this like mutually reinforcing dynamic of giving and receiving. And even though I had my concerns about academics and so on in the early years that my kids came here, I never had a concern about them as far as being cared for, supported, and encouraged in who they were. There's just a sense that this mutually supportive environment allows each child, no matter what their age, to have a voice, to express what they most want and need, and know that it will be met with respect. And and there will be feedback sometimes, because sometimes we have unreasonable wants. But it's this wonderful self-regulating, self-monitoring system where, as individuals, the young kids learn what it is they care about, how it is they can go about getting what they want, and how they can, in fact, contribute in a way that, most young kids are kind of used to being takers. It's like, oh, this is organized so I get what I want, and so on. They learn here that there's a lot of joy in also being part of the giving back. And I think that's really important in forming an individual who feels whole and healthy and happy going through life. So in some ways, I think that the real excitement is around the young child's experience. Some of our experiences, like with our oldest son, we were noticing the differences between what he had been suffering and now how he's like kind of getting over that and being supported. But it's like with younger kids from the outset, they have this encouragement to just be who they are. And yes, to become aware of the impact they have on others around them and all this, but I think it's a very rich environment and very supportive environment.
Well, I certainly remember, I have all kinds of memories of growing up here. And I remember a lot of just going around and like playing huge make-believe games that would get very complex and go on for what felt like a long time as a child, but was probably only a couple of weeks. And building huge elaborate forts, and those becoming more elaborate, and then eventually forming, even as a very young kid, forming corporations and stuff like that to support building forts and having like fort building supplies and things of that variety. And a lot of playing in the sandbox and running around and hanging out with my friends. I remember that there was a lot of a lot of friendships form and break as a child. And I remember it was very strange dealing with that in a scenario where there's no, it's just me and my friends and we work out all of our own things. Of course we had the judicial system to resolve any serious problems, but most days it was like, I don't want to play with you or you don't want to play with me. And, sometimes the other person's like, no, I want to play with you a lot, but you don't want to play with me. And you learn to deal with these things when you're young. And but I remember it was just a lot of running around and playing games and being with my friends and just hanging out outside and doing all kinds of cool stuff. And then there'd be certain times where you get really fascinated by something like, we had a dissection microscope, and so we'd get really fascinated by what grass would look like up close, or if you cut open a blade of grass, or what all the various particles in the sandbox looked like, and things like that. And so some of those things kind of became more long-term interests, especially for myself with geology and engineering and things of that variety. And so what, of course, went from playing in the sandbox and building forts became a career in, doing construction and building highways and runways and stuff like that. And then eventually the adventure became working on a ship and doing engineering there. And so I remember it was a lot of just hanging out and having a good time. Just a very happy environment, playing with my friends, eating whenever I wanted to eat, not really worrying about anything, apart from the things that kids worry about, like what toys are there, or, things like that. But it was just a really happy time in my life, that's for sure. I hope that answered the question. If there's more specific questions, please ask them.
For some reason, what just popped into my head was this phrase. It's the difference between learning to be self-conscious and learning to be self-aware. And I think a lot of younger kids are made very self-conscious because of the types and the quality of the feedback they get from adults and the systems around them. And here, there's a lot more, as I say, of an affirming and encouraging type of energy, where they're encouraged to kind of learn more about themselves and take more responsibility for themselves, rather than to be self-conscious and in reaction to everything, which is very much the way that I grew up.
Well, thank you very much.